Why the unbreakable transmission was just a 98-pound compromise. The most legendary transmission in muscle car history wasn't an engineering masterpiece. It was a 98-pound admission of failure. It's 1963. A Ford Galaxie lightweight screams off the drag strip line, its 427 FE engine churning out 480 pound-feet of torque. Then, a sickening bang. The transmission didn't just fail, it shattered. At the time, the industry standard Borg-Warner T10 was a glass jaw. Its side-loading design created a fatal mechanical loophole. Under heavy load, the aluminum case would flex, forcing the gears apart until they cannibalized themselves. Henry Ford, II's total performance mandate, was collapsing under its own power. The solution wasn't elegant engineering, it was panic. The Ford toploader wasn't born from finesse. It was a cast-iron sledgehammer built to solve a problem that required a scalpel. It didn't win by being smarter. It won by being heavier. If you believe engineering is about efficiency, not just mass, hit like. If you've ever blown up a T10, share your story in the comments. So, how did Ford finally cure the glass jaw that plagued their racing program? They did not discover a miraculous alien alloy, nor did they reinvent the fundamental geometry of gear teeth. Instead, they cheated physics by exploiting a mechanical loophole rooted in pure structural rigidity. To understand the genius of the toploader, one must first look at the fatal flaw of its contemporaries like the Borg-Warner T10 and the early GM Muncies. These were side loaders, meaning they featured a massive rectangular window cut directly into the side of the case to allow assembly workers to slide the gears in with ease. While convenient for production, that gaping hole acted as a catastrophic stress riser, a wound that allowed the entire case to twist under the torque of a 427 engine. Ford's engineers, led by a team that prioritized survival over sophistication, looked at that structural weakness and decided to eliminate it entirely. They cast the toploader case as a solid, continuous iron tub with absolutely no side access, forcing mechanics to drop every component in from the top. This tub philosophy created a fortress of rigidity that simply refused to flex, creating a nightmare for the service department but an absolute fortress for the engineer. This is where the loophole becomes technical, as the secret was not the steel itself, but the rigidity it provided. When a drag racer dumps 500 pound-feet of torque into a T10, the aluminum case flexes, forcing the shafts to spread apart until the gears ride on their tips and shear. The toploader's tub design simply refused to flex, locking the countershaft and main shaft in a parallel death grip. This structural integrity allowed Ford to push the centerline distance between the shafts to a massive 3.03 inches, overshadowing the 3.00 inches of the Muncie and the anemic 2.87 inches of the T10. That extra fraction of an inch was not a minor detail. It provided the necessary real estate to pack in larger, thicker gears without them grinding against each other, proving that their victory was one of simple math rather than magic. The commitment to brute force extended to the input shaft as well. If one were to disassemble a standard Muncie M20, they would find a polite 1-inch shaft that was perfectly adequate for a Corvette, but insufficient for Ford's heavyweights. For the 427 Galaxie, Ford raided the parts bin of their medium-duty trucks to equip the big block toploader with a monstrous 1 3/8 inch input shaft. This was not a passenger car component. It was industrial hardware masquerading as racing equipment, a solid bar of steel so thick that twisting it would require a catastrophic amount of force. Furthermore, it is time to dismantle the lingering impeller myth that pervades hardcore forums. Many enthusiasts incorrectly believe the toploader contains internal fluid impellers to aid aerodynamics at high RPM, but this is pure nonsense. What observers are actually seeing are the crudest, most violent synchronizers ever fitted to a passenger car. Unlike the delicate brass rings found in European gearboxes, Ford's synchros are massive hubs of machined steel, with thick blocker rings that only resemble pump fans because of their sheer size. They were not designed for fluid dynamics. They were designed to be slammed into gear at 7,000 RPM by a driver who hates his car, surviving by absorbing shock rather than deflecting it. Ultimately, the top loader did not solve the problem of metallurgical stress limits. It simply built a cage so rigid that the gears had no choice but to stay meshed, marking a victory of geometry over metallurgy. This is the chapter of the story that Ford loyalists often conveniently forget. For while the top loader was an undeniable triumph of durability, it was simultaneously a disaster for vehicle dynamics. In the ruthless calculus of performance, immortality comes with a heavy price tag, and in this case, that price was paid in pounds. To understand the magnitude of this trade-off, one must simply look at the scale. A standard iron case top loader tips the scales between 98 and 115 pounds, depending on the tail housing. In stark contrast, the aluminum-cased Muncie M22 Rock Crusher weighs in at a lean 75 to 80 pounds, and the featherweight Borg-Warner T10 sits at roughly 65 to 70 pounds. We are talking about a deadweight penalty of nearly 40 pounds. But the number alone is misleading. This was not luggage in the trunk. This was a dense block of cast iron hanging directly behind the engine, shifting the center of gravity forward and turning the car's nose into a pendulum. The real-world consequences of this engineering decision played out dramatically during the development of the 1965 Shelby GT350. Ken Miles, the legendary test driver and engineer tasked with turning the Secretary's car Mustang into a Corvette killer, found himself at war with the laws of physics. The prototype GT350 models suffered from severe understeer. Test notes from the era described the front end as honest but stubborn, a polite euphemism for a car that would plow straight off the track at Riverside unless bullied into a corner with throttle-induced oversteer. The heavy iron transmission acted as an anchor, fighting the driver's inputs at every turn. This leads to a detail that often shocks those who worship the unbreakable top loader. When it came time to build the purebred GT350R models for competition, Carroll Shelby and Ken Miles actually rejected Ford's premier transmission. Despite the glass jaw reputation of the Borg-Warner T10, Shelby specified the aluminum T10M for the race cars. They deliberately chose the weaker gearbox because saving those critical pounds off the nose was worth the risk of mechanical failure. They understood that on a technical road course, a durable car that refuses to turn is useless. So, if the top loader destroyed handling, why did Ford insist on installing it in thousands of street Mustangs and Fairlanes? The answer lies not in performance, but in corporate accounting. Casting a transmission case in iron was significantly cheaper than aluminum in the mid-1960s, and the case's immense rigidity meant it almost never came back for warranty repairs. The accountants in Dearborn calculated that the average street driver would never push the car hard enough to notice the terminal understeer, but they would certainly notice a broken gear. The top loader was not a performance feature. It was a cast iron insurance policy designed to protect Ford's bottom line, sacrificing the finesse of the driving experience for the brute bluntness of reliability. If the weight of the top loader was a crime against handling, its internal gear spacing was a crime against finesse. To truly dismantle the myth of Ford's engineering prowess, we must look beyond the iron case and examine the mathematical relationship between the gears themselves. This is where the lazy philosophy of the top loader is most ruthlessly exposed. The vast majority of top loaders found in street legends like the Mustang GT, Mach 1, and Fairlane were equipped with the wide ratio gear set. On paper, the numbers 2.78 first, 1.93 second, 1.36 third, and 1.00 fourth seem innocuous. But on the track, specifically in the critical